It's not that deep. Everything love, lust, and life.
Sex. We talk about it so you can get better at it. We can all get better at it and maybe feel a bit happier in the process. It's not that deep. Or is it?
Hi, I'm Rebecca and I'm here with my good friends and colleagues, Andy and Fran, who are husband and wife, and we are here for another episode of Sex, It's Not That Deep. And this time we're talking about sex and mental health. It's called Hump Your Way Happy. We are going to discuss the side effects, I guess, of having sex and the benefits it has and a little bit of the science behind it. So, Fran, what's your experience with sex and mental health?
Well, really, more than the benefits of it, it's also looking at the things that can affect sex. Because we've had in our relationship anyway, a big long period where I had quite significant depression, and that really dampened our sex lives quite significantly, didn't it? It was a big drought. And then coming back from that, the fact that we reconnected sexually, I think, helped the sort of mental recovery at the end of it, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess as well as sex itself, we can talk about where it's just on our own, like the actual impact of having an orgasm, whether or not you're with somebody else, has very similar, if not the same effects of being in a sexual relationship with somebody else.
Because it's all hormones, isn't it? So you're releasing cortisol and there's another
oxytocin.
Oxytocin.
Yeah, the big guns is oxytocin and dopamine as well. So oxytocin is the love hormone, the hug hormone, released during physical touch and orgasm, relieves stress and anxiety, also creates feelings of bonding and trust. And additionally, dopamine is released and triggers the reward center of the brain. So that makes us feel good, keeps us wanting more.
And cortisol helps to reduce stress as well,
I think cortisol is the stress hormone.
No, it's the other way. It reduces your cortisol. That's the one.
Yeah, that's probably
I get it right then. And it does. It definitely does. The more that we've reconnected sexually, the more on a level keel I feel. I think once I've started to feel better, it sort of helps that process of getting better.
Yeah.
I think if people are depressed and go off sex, I think there's always that, I can't push it on you sort of thing. And that sex just sort of completely fades away. But I think it's actually important to rekindle that sort of passion. And I think we've gone, once we've got back into the swing of it, we've gone from sort of nothing to quite a lot.
I think it's one of those things that it's reciprocal, isn't it? So you know, if you've been off sex because of mental health problems, which is a very easy thing to happen, as soon as you can get back into it, it can either be, it sort of reignites it completely and you're off again as you maybe were previous to that, or where somewhere you'd like to be. But what we also found was that we would, during that drought, we would have sex and it would be like maybe the first time in a while, and then it would have rekindled it, and then maybe the next day or the day after that we would again, and it's like, brilliant, we're back into it. Now obviously at that point in time you were the one that was struggling with it more, as you said yourself. So then I'm thinking, brilliant, we're back into it now, and then we would maybe have another few weeks or so where there was no real intimacy at all, and then it's hard because obviously I want to understand what you're going through and to support you through it, but it was quite hard because you could quite easily sort of sway from one to the other. And
yeah, and I don't think I was in that mood. I don't think I was great at communicating either, and I think the key to good sex is good communication. And I think when your mental health has gone, I think your communication skills go down as well with it.
Yeah.
And I think suddenly that just sort of makes that sort of flow just not work as well.
Mm-hmm. And Andy, what are your mental health benefits from having sex? Do you notice a difference in your mental health when you've had sex?
Definitely do. I think that whether that's as a couple or even just yourself, I'm sure many people have used masturbation as a distraction to stress, depression, just boredom, whatever it might be. It's always often a welcome distraction for people. And it, like you say, there's that hormone hit, isn't there?
Yeah.
Which helps during and I suppose after. But I suppose it's probably double the fact if it's as part of a relationship and you're having sex with your partner or whoever it might be. it's a case that it is a massive boost to your confidence, just to satisfy your sex drive. There's so many factors to it, I think.
I think that hormone hit can be quite addictive as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's dopamine.
You've talked about feeling that you're addicted to sex.
Yeah.
And do you think maybe that might just be, the fact that it does make you feel good?
Yeah, so interestingly, you can't actually be physically dependent on sex. It doesn't exist.
Really?
No, it's all in the brain, so it's all linked to it's a psychological addiction more than a physical addiction. And from a psychological point of view, you've got dopamine involved, you've got the reward center, just like we're addicted to our phones. We can't physically be dependent on our phones, but we can get into a kind of, it's a habit effectively. We can get into a habit of what is my life without that habit being continuously there.
You can also, I was wondering whether you sort of use it as like self-soothing.
Yeah.
For
100%.
For when you're feeling down and, when your mental health isn't quite where it should be.
Yeah,
and I think
that's where the oxytocin comes in. And you're getting that benefit that oxytocin comes from things like physical touch. It comes from sort of stimulation of the mouth. It comes from eating good food. It comes from sort of being comfortable in your temperature, little things like that. And my profession as a yoga teacher, I talk about it all the time, about oxytocin. And a massive issue for people was single people during lockdown, such as myself, who didn't have sort of going out for nice meals, who didn't have being touched by another person, wasn't cuddled for months and months and months, I was completely on my own. And you get like deficient in oxytocin. And interestingly, sort of more recent studies are talking about the links with depression and the three hormones surrounding that, the serotonin, oxytocin, and I can't remember, it might be dopamine, which is the other one, and talking about how it's an imbalance of one or all of them that link towards that. So it's finding a happy balance between the two, and that's why SSRI, serotonin, long word, inhibitors, help with the brain balance there. But the oxytocin is such a key part of your happiness that is so, I think, underrated, especially as I think we used to live in much more, community settings. And, if you go way back when we were living in tribal settings, when we were all living in groups, sleeping next to each other and helping, breastfeed each other's children and bringing each other's children up, it's all to do with the physical touch, the oxytocin release. I think it's such an essential hormone that is completely dismissed.
I think we do use that because I've always had very up and down moods, and I've always been really, really up and down. And I think we do actually use sex and intimacy to help level me out. I just don't think we've ever really thought of it like that.
Yeah, I think maybe on a subconscious level we maybe have done that. Did you find when you were, especially in that time where you were struggling with depression, did you have a drive to masturbate?
No, it dried up. And you can sort of gauge how you're going downhill by the fact that you're like, no, I'm not actually even that bothered.
Yeah.
And that even that self-release isn't there. It's not just the sex. And I think people who are with people who are depressed or very anxious or things that really switch you off to sex think that it's about them. But no, it was completely sex all round that I wasn't interested in. I wasn't really interested in myself. I wasn't particularly interested in myself physically all round. So
the libido links so closely to depression, like they are twinned together. It's, even in sort of antidepressants, one of the things that's in sort of research that we talk about later is the effect that antidepressant medication, as beneficial as it can be for some people's mental health, also can completely wipe out somebody's sex drive.
Yeah, I know. I think it did that for me. I was on medication for a while. It was quite a while actually. I actually accidentally cold turkeyed whilst at a trade show, which is probably not the best way to do that. But it didn't suddenly make me horny in the middle of the trade show. It just made me really, really weirdly hot flushed and having trouble with all sorts of things whilst trying to talk business with people, which doesn't really work.
I think that was a really good point now a minute ago around it for you. It was looking back a bit of a gauge as to where your mental health was, that you were interested in anything, whether it's sex with someone else or just alone. And I think that's actually a really key point probably for a lot of people, is that it probably is a good indicator of that. And I think if you're in a relationship where your partner is maybe suffering in that way, as that was the case for us, rather than necessarily feeling that they don't want to have sex with me or they've lost interest in me, it probably or possibly is the other way, that it's just they've lost interest in themselves.
Yeah.
And that was how I think we dealt with it, is I was supportive of it. I knew that it wasn't a deep down, it wasn't that you didn't want to have sex. It's just that at that point in time, you just weren't in that mindset. You weren't in that place.
I think I have the whole masturbate to sleep thing, because I find that really relaxing. And in my mind, I call it Pavlov's wank, basically. It just makes you just settle down into sleep and really happy and relaxed and go into deep sleep really easily. But if I'm not feeling mentally very well, then I don't do that. And I find my sleep suffers, not necessarily as a result of the sex itself, but just generally my sleep is suffering. And so I think they're all sort of linked in together as a bit of a ball, a sort of circular thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
One begets the other.
And like sex is massively beneficial to your physical health. Like, as I found out in my research, which completely shocked me actually, sort of it's massively beneficial to people with migraines. Sort of 70% reported moderate to complete relief of a migraine, 91% reported complete relief in cluster headaches. Men who have between 4.6 to 7 ejaculations a week were 36% less likely to receive a prostate cancer diagnosis. It's absolutely nuts. And this just goes on. And that's in comparison with men who reported ejaculating 2 or fewer times a week on average. And then one study that had a 10-year follow-up reported that men who had frequent orgasms, defined as 1 or 2 or more a week, had 50% lower mortality risk than those who had sex less often.
Well, I'm doing the best I can.
What that made me think of at the time is, that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where he's going, you've got to wank every single day and you've got to do it to make yourself like more on the ball, more physically sort of ready. And it just made me realise that actually it probably is a bit of science in that, actually.
It's interesting because, sort of controversial to the comments on it being beneficial, there's sort of a lot of creeping in things about how ejaculation and semen retention, all of that theory around how semen retention is supposed to be good for you, and ejaculation uses a lot of energy and all this kind of stuff. So it's really interesting, the newer stuff that's coming out. I don't know if there's any particular research on that, and it's more anecdotal. And this is something, Andy, that I think would be really interesting that I found, and I've had this sort of experience with several previous partners. There's something called Post-Coital Dysphoria. I think it's 40% of men, 46% of women. So this is where you're flooded with a wave of negative emotions right after sex for no discernible reason, even if the experience was consensual, pleasurable and satisfying. It's surprisingly common. The exact cause is unknown. However, it is common with those who've experienced PTSD. But yeah, it's about 46% of women and 41% of men.
That's really high. I've never experienced it.
I've experienced it with previous partners, 100%. Yeah,
I suppose that just leads to a sense of regret.
I think there's a lot of it can be so conflicting to the men that go through these, who I've been with, through these experiences, because they're like, hold on, that was completely consensual. Why does nobody feel like this? I just need a few minutes to recenter. And there's a sex coach I follow on Instagram who talks about it a lot with men, about how common it is and how they just need to take a couple of moments to get back in, and then it's not their fault, and it's just like some random kind of psychological hormonal experience. Have you ever heard of that in your...
I've never experienced that, and I think we've talked before that certainly within my peer group, men don't talk about sex, so I wouldn't know whether friends have experienced that or not. But I think it highlights for me actually the importance of recognising that. I think the common misconception is that sex is in the brain for women and it's a physical thing for men, which it isn't at all. It is completely in the brain. As the science backs that up, but that misconception is that from a man's perspective, it's just a physical thing. It's a physical act, and it isn't at all. And I think the sooner people sort of come to terms with that and realise it a bit more strongly, both themselves and their partners and everyone around them, I think people are probably going to be in a much more fulfilled state and be having better sex as a result.
Yeah, I think we don't need to matter it out so much. I think that goes back to me saying in previous episode, I was saying about how we're so schoolground about sex, you know, that we're still childish about it. And I think, again, we're just not emotionally, as a race almost, we're just not emotionally mature enough about it yet to actually be like, no, this is still all about feelings, even if it's physical. There's still feelings, there's still hormones involved. And a lot of it's in the head as well.
It's a physical act, but it's driven by the brain, isn't it?
Well, how many things like erectile dysfunction things are there where it's half of that's in the head? I mean, there are some physical causes of it, but a lot of it is worry around things or stress or other kind of emotions.
Yeah, do you want a fun fact?
Triggering things.
From Rebecca about, so I've slept with my fair few number of people. Every single experience, and we're talking over 20 people, every single experience of my first time with somebody, they have had an erectile dysfunction issue. The first time I've ever slept with any person ever.
Wow.
Yeah. I think it's a wonderful stat to have. I'm like, wow. It's just something, I think I'm quite intimidating. I think that's what it is. Thing is, it's happened so much now. Like with me partners, I'm like, I'm expecting it. You know, I'm disappointed if you remain, you know, able
To attention.
Yeah. So it's obviously it's very common, but also, like you said, in the head a lot of the time. And I haven't looked into the research behind it, but I think there must be a big element in the head, because these people have then gone on to be absolutely fine post first experience.
Yeah, maybe again, kind of a stress and a feel of having to perform.
Yeah.
I think, and I think that sort of sits on both people as well, especially for first time. There's so many first times that are rubbish because of that sort of like it's built up in your mind to be a specific thing, and you've got to perform. And I think if you just sort of fall into things, it flows a lot better.
So, like, when I've asked partners about, like, what do you think about during sex, wanting to get, like, a juicy answer, like a celebrity, and I'd be like, oh, what? And they'd be like, oh, you know, just making sure I'm staying hard, making sure I'm just doing everything I can to, and I was like, what? I was like, all I'm thinking about is how to have an orgasm, and thinking about my own pleasure. And you're so concerned that you're going to look bad to me by not maintaining. I was like, what? This is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, sex isn't Instagram. You don't have to be perfect.
No, and
it is a massive worry for guys, though.
Yeah.
I mean, even us within a long-term relationship, even fairly recently, I've had that where I'm concentrating on is don't lose it. No, that's never a problem I've had before, but it's just something enters your mind or whatever, and you know, your erection's maybe not as strong as it was when you were 18 and at the height of your sort of libido and your sexual peak. And so as soon as that worry gets in there and it squirrels away, it's hard to think about anything else.
I think,
and then that just has a negative effect.
Also, going through it separately, I think, because you feel like it's a problem with you, but I mean, there's so many other things we can do if that goes. It's not a problem.
I think that's it, isn't it?
But I think you work it up in your head to be a problem.
Yeah. Why is sex about that? Why can't it be about just intimacy in general? Why does it have to be about erection, orgasm?
Yeah.
You know, why can't it be we're spending really close time together, both, you know, naked bodies?
We've had sex sessions where one or even both of us hasn't come. And that's not been an issue, and that's been... But I think it's possibly because it's not planned that way. You're not planning to be in that situation. I think that's the problem.
Well, I've had multiple gynecological surgeries, which has meant I haven't been able to be penetrated for, like, quite a serious amount of time. And it's not stopped me from finding other ways to enjoy sex that don't involve the standard sort of, like, the penetration aspect. And for men, there's, like, I can't remember how many points, but I know women can orgasm in 6-7 different ways. And I'm sure men it's similar, like, in terms of they have different methods of orgasm. You know, nipple stimulation for both sexes is a very high one. Ears is another one. That's another spot.
Down with the nipple thing, but not with ears.
But and then it's all so much power to the brain as well. So much power. That's something I'm awesome at, is just my brain can create so many wonderful stories.
I'm a bit overly focused on orgasms, so I tend to sort of chase them. But I find that if suddenly something enters your head and you're like, I'm behind, sort of thing, you know, we're not doing this together, because we are quite practiced at and really good at coming together.
Uh-huh.
And I really like that. But if I know that you're well ahead of me and I'm chasing, then it get in my head and then I'm like, done, sort of thing. That's not happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's an easy thing to get in your own head whilst you're doing something, instead of concentrating on a fantasy or something, just to help yourself along without it being a pressure.
Yeah.
It's the pressure bit that suddenly makes things go south.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a number of things there, that a lot of the insecurities around sex during the act that clearly can then trigger problems with mental health. For sure. There's so many things we've just talked about there that if you circle back, that could even be the cause of mental health issues rather than...
But then get it right and you fix those things in many ways. You know, I always feel much better about my body when we have a good sex life. Regardless of how I feel about how I look specifically, I just feel better when I feel sexier. Regardless of whether I've lost weight or whether I'm looking trim or anything like that. It just... Because I know that you still love me and I know that you still find me attractive, but it's physically that just sort of bangs it home, I suppose. I think it's easier than just words. I think you really feel it as an embodiment of those words.
And just like going back, I know we keep circling back, but going back to the physical benefits and how that can affect you in the long run from a mental health perspective, the female benefits of sex are it can improve your bladder control, reduce incontinence, relieve menstrual and premenstrual cramps, improve fertility, build stronger pelvic muscles, help produce more vaginal lubrication, potentially protect you against endometriosis or the growing of tissue outside your uterus. And particularly for like menstrual cramps, I 100%, most of the time, if I can orgasm while I'm in extreme pain, it does make a difference because it's that oxytocin that will surge. Yeah, oh my God, I'm such a period sex addict. But it will surge through the whole body, and oxytocin is like, it's like with codeine. So codeine is my painkiller that I get prescribed for, I have endometriosis. And it mainly chills your brain out because you're just so calm. You don't think about the pain. And I think oxytocin has a very similar effect in that it calms you so much that you just don't focus on the pain. You're like, oh, it's all good.
You know what, that makes sense. I used to get the horn as soon as I came on. But I never really sort of twigged. And now I have a coil, so I don't actually have periods at all. But I think the hormones still follow the same sort of pattern. So I get random periods of horn every sort of 3-4 weeks.
Yeah. No,
That's probably what it is.
In a much more simple sense, though, I've always sort of been aware of this, but didn't realise it until I heard a soundbite on TikTok the other week, where if you've had sex or masturbated when you've got a cold, if you've got a really heavy cold and your nose is running, if you start masturbating or having sex, you'll realise after you finish, oh, my nose isn't running anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like magic.
I've never realised that.
I love that. I'm sat here like, yeah, I know that.
Tried this one.
Right, next time you've got a heavy cold, try it. And I bet your nose will stop running and you won't feel like shit.
So this is one of the things, because this is a little bit of a down thing, but when we lost a baby, I was really, really physically scarred afterwards. But because you have the hormones at the end of it, I found being pregnant made me really horny anyway. I had so much hormones. I was so ridiculously horny during this period of grief. And you think, oh, it's kind of wrong because I'm grieving, but I'm really horny. But actually, I think it's part of the grieving process, and B, part of your body sort of physically getting over things.
Yeah.
Is just to get that sort of the dopamine and just to get the oxytocin going again. And I think it is a sort of natural way of your body repairing. And I think maybe I was thinking that it's wrong when actually it should be just a normal part of getting over things.
Yeah, your body can pick up what you need, I think, quite easily. I think it is something that
we don't listen to it enough.
We don't listen to it, absolutely. And maybe we don't feel safe to, we don't feel permission to, we don't feel accepting of our own libido and our own needs. And we're like, oh, I'll just ignore that, suppress that. When actually you're like, oh, damn, this is so beneficial. It makes me feel so much better.
I think we're forever putting chains on ourselves sexually.
Yeah.
Because we've got these ideals of what society thinks we should be. And actually, our body's telling us otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. So those hormones, in terms of the benefits they can produce, you've got oxytocin, you've got endorphins, you've got dopamine. It's increased satisfaction with your mental health, increased levels of trust, intimacy, and love in your relationships, improved ability to perceive, identify, and express emotions. And I'll go into this a little bit further in a bit. Lessened use of your immature psychological defense mechanisms. So it's talking about the fight or flight here, or the mental processes to reduce distress from emotional conflict. So yeah, it's talking about oxytocin is released with our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest, your body's feeling safe, calm, in control, versus your fight or flight, which is the cortisol, which is the complete opposite, panic mode. You know, you're not going to be releasing nice hormones when you're panicking, basically. So yeah, it's just, there's so many beautiful things for your mental health that it can sort of create for you. And then going into what it was saying about the improved ability to perceive things. So one study found that a correlation between frequent sexual activity and looking significantly younger, between 7 to 12 years younger. So you look younger if you have loads of sex, basically.
Unless you have children. I found my first grey hair when my my eldest was 12 weeks old. So maybe not that far.
Yeah. It's interesting. It says the majority of these individuals were also comfortable expressing their sexuality and sexual identity.
I think actually you're talking about this mental clarity. We quite often have sessions where we lay and talk to each other sort of in and around sex. That is where we have our sort of deepest connections, and we have the most sort of healing talks about things, and we make the most progress as a couple. So I think that actually really does fit in with the mental clarity and sex. And you're saying about oxytocin, I think you're saying there is basically literally sex just makes us chill the fuck out.
Yeah,
really.
100%. But also, you know, in history, in sort of a spirituality type of thing, orgasm was used as like a spellbinding solution. So like when a woman's orgasm was seen as like a magical spell, basically. So make a wish when you orgasm is my tip.
Or maybe that's true. There's a bit of a focus on something.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And going back to that mental clarity, at an older age, sexual activity might affect your well-being and ability to think. Research found that sexually active adults between 50 to 90 years old had better memory. They were also less likely to feel depressed and lonely. Frequent sexual activity, whether with a partner or alone, can make you look younger even when at an older age. And it's partly due to the release of estrogen during sex. So I feel like the sex life of people in their 50 to 90s is such a secret area. I wish I knew more about it. Do they still have sex?
I don't know.
This is what I mean. Like, it's just
that's the problem. We don't know, but we don't know if our friends, you know, our closest friends are having sex. We don't even know that because we just don't talk about it enough.
Yeah.
I think that it comes with the boxes that you grow up in, the certain rules that you engage in. The thought of your parents, your grandparents having sex is just not something that goes into your head, is it?
No.
You don't want to know.
No.
And that's why we don't know.
No. And he's like, let's leave it there.
Yeah.
Not interested.
my dad was telling me things as my dad was sort of summing up his life as he was dying, more or less. And we were talking about things, and he was suddenly started telling me about his sex life, and I was like, not one of the things I want to have an abiding memory of you. And he was going on about how how he would basically fuck anything that moved, and I was like, brilliant. That's not something that I'm particularly sure that I needed to know. Perhaps you could have given me the rest of the life lessons that I was looking for. But actually, it is quite interesting to know.
I'd be so fascinated to know.
And he was saying that he knew that he was ill because his libido completely went, and that it made him feel really emasculated at the end of it. And that's quite interesting, and that he felt quite depressed as his libido went, and it wasn't the depression. He didn't have depression causing libido going. It was the other way around.
Yeah.
But the illness caused the libido to go, and then that created a bit of depression around it.
Yeah.
And a feeling like he wasn't as much of a man, I suppose, at the end of it, which again goes back to our, like, it's not, like, it is in the head, but we don't think it is.
Yeah.
And then we have that kind of macho need that to be, you know, you have to be this strong, fit in a box kind of bloke, and that actually, even though he didn't acknowledge it at the time, I think that's exactly what that was, is that actually he was feeling this emotional problem, and that was leading to a physical one.
Yeah.
I think as a man, you grow up knowing that what the expectations are of you as a man sexually, and what you should be able to do, and how you should perform, and it's quite toxic, really. And then I totally get that. If as you get older, or illness forces it, and it drops, and that libido and that drive disappears, that must be a huge cause of mental health issues for men. It must be.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and actually I did a little sector of research on celibacy, on those who don't have sex, because a lot of my research is basically saying, oh, sex is the best thing on earth, it's so good for you. Then what about the people who don't have sex? So according to the NHS, a long-term study of nuns who are celibate, many of them lived well into their 90s and past 100 years old. So you can still have similar benefits without sex. The recommendation here was engaging in other pleasurable activities like exercising, interacting with a pet in a non-sexual way, and having a strong network of friends could potentially offer the same benefits.
But then nuns have that strong network, the strong community. So maybe that's, and especially as we get older, we know that sense of community is really important. So maybe that's sort of taking the place of sex.
Yeah.
I think that's true of everything though, isn't it? If you do lots of things well in terms of your own well-being, it all combines to give you the best chance of having a long, healthy life, doesn't it?
But again,
sex isn't just going to be the one thing that if you have lots of sex, but you eat nothing but kebabs and smoke and drink alcohol all the time, you're not necessarily going to have that long life. But if you do everything as well as you can, you're giving yourself the best opportunity, aren't you?
Yeah. But going back to that sense of community that nuns feel that makes them live longer, but you get that also from being sexually sort of connected to someone, and that really deep connection. And again, it goes back to having the ability to talk to someone properly about it and connect as well as you possibly can. And the communication aspect, we always keep going back to the communication aspect.
So what do we think about casual sex and mental health? Because there's interesting stats on this, which I didn't get for this particular episode because I think my opinion is biased on this. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about mental health and casual sex.
I think all sex is positive, but if you're coming at it from a negative point of view, I think it can probably act as a catalyst.
Yeah. Andy?
I can speak from my own personal experience. So obviously now casual sex isn't such a thing. I've been in a relationship for a long time. Thinking back though, before that, I didn't have as much casual sex as I would have liked, if I'm honest. And so would it have boosted my mental health looking back? It probably would, because you feel more confident, you feel happier, you've got all of the hormonal things. And I think confidence is a big thing in this actually, because as well, where you say about people appear younger, a big part of that is confidence, isn't it? If you carry your body, if you carry yourself in a confident way, you look more appealing to other people, and you probably do look younger.
The more confident you are, the more successful you are, the more people react to that.
Especially as that study said that it was the people who were really confident in their sexuality and their sexual identity that were seen as being the younger looking ones. I guess they were just seen as more admirable to people in general, because they were like, oh, damn, they know what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, you know.
Yeah, and they're embodying it as well.
Yeah.
I think if you embody that confidence, then you're bringing it back towards you, and people are attracted to that in itself.
Yeah.
You become more attractive just by being confident.
Because I think what's happened with casual sex is it's sort of developing back again this sort of real shameful, oh no, it's not good for women, because they build up a relation. Like when you have sex with somebody, the oxytocin is also acts as a bonding hormone. Whoever you have an oxytocin experience with, whether that's, you know, even maternally, you know, that's what mums and kids release when they're through breastfeeding. You build up a bond with somebody. So when you've had sex with your partner, or even if that's a casual partner, you do have that bonding hormone. So that's where they're then saying, oh, it's unhealthy for you because you're coming away from that situation and you're not going to be able to rebond that person because it was casual sex, it was one-off sort of thing. Yeah, from my experience, sort of similar to Andy, I had a fucking great time. It was brilliant. I had only positive experiences. And, you know, I think that maybe like Fran said, if you go about it from I'm super desperate and lonely and I feel so depressed and nobody wants me and I'm just going to sleep with anybody, then maybe, yes, it's going to make you feel worse about it. But I think if you go about it from I'm empowered, I need to release this feeling in my body, I want to spend, you know, however long with somebody random and never have to see them again, and just to get what I need and they can get what they need, and it's like a mutual respect situation, then I don't see a problem with that.
I think it's also a little bit like alcohol. You know, if you go into it and you really throw yourself into it and have fun, it sort of builds as an experience and you end up having a great time. I have had one night stands where I've not thrown myself into it and not had a great time. And I think, you really do have to throw yourself into it mentally as well as physically.
Yeah.
And again, I think goes back to that sex is in the head for both of you, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think a summary of our Hump Your Way Happy today episode is that sex is generally pretty damn good for you. From like a physical point of view, you've got even boosting your immune system, and I've listed all the sort of physical benefits, which will then go on to the mental health benefits. We've talked about the benefits of the hormones released during orgasm, during physical contact, that will help with bonding in a relationship, which will help with your own mental health. And then we've talked about as well a little bit of sort of the downsides, the things that you could struggle with. There's one thing I did forget to mention actually about ADHD. So interestingly, those with ADHD either tend to have hypersexuality, an unusually high sex drive, aka moi, or a non-existent sex drive, although neither are recognised as diagnostic criteria for ADHD, and that's obviously not going to be the same case for everybody. And then we also talked about Post-Coital Dysphoria, where the feeling of feeling negative emotions right after sex as well. So there's lots of links to mental health and sex. I think we've probably covered everything today, unless anybody's got anything else.
Just also that it's just not, it doesn't have to be sex between two people, that it can just be solo, and that can release almost as much
100%.
Good vibes.
Yeah.
You know, a good session.
I don't think there's any shame in using that as a making yourself feel happy tool. There shouldn't be any guilt around it.
No, Pavlov's wank should be available for everyone.
Yeah. And on that note.
But it does. It leaves you feeling happy and satisfied and ready to go to sleep.
100%.
There we go.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Please do give us a review, a thumbs up. Listen to our YouTubes, have a look on our social media, TikTok and Instagram, and we hope to see you soon for another episode of Sex It's Not That Deep.
Sex.
It's not that deep.